Hi, this is Matthew Tate. Welcome to Fork in the Road. This is a continuation of my adoption series. Today I am at the National War Museum in Geelong, where there is an exhibition without consent, as you can see me behind me. This is Australia's past adoption practices. This is a really emotional place for adoptees and is valuable for anyone looking to understand their own story. So come and join me inside and we'll have a quick look around. So I'm now inside the without consent, and you can see here, this is basically the apology that the Prime Minister of Australia issued. You can see it there. She issued it as a written statement and also as a speech, which is, I'll get a link on. And you can see behind me there's actually a screen which is playing that video, which I'll have a look at in a moment. So basically you can see here an apology from the National Archives. This is the letter behind us, and this is where the Prime Minister of the country of Australia apologised for past adoption practices. This was a big moment where there was acknowledgement and apology for all of the pain and the suffering that was caused for so many people in Australia, where children were forcibly or coercively taken from their parents who did not want to give them up in a time of conservatism where it was not acceptable to be out of wedlock and pregnant. And as such, the rule was, if you weren't married, then that child was unwanted and illegitimate. So there's 250,000 Australians who have gone through that and living that life. So it's a reasonable reason for an apology, because these were forced practices. So this is a really moving exhibition. If I move around, you can see that there's all sorts of different plaques on the walls with people's stories, with unpacking the story as to what would happen to a young girl in the 1950s, 60s, 70s and up to 1980. And it shows how the system put a lot of cultural pressure on the community, on the parents and on everyone around you, that it was not acceptable to keep the child, which is the beginning of my story. So it's a fairly emotional place to be. And it's interesting reading all those different stories and the perspectives on these plaques from adoptees, from natural mothers, and from generations thereafter, like the children of adoptive parents. The children of adoptees. So it's a very emotional place, and it's a place. It's a great exhibition, but it's a place where you can get to learn about the history, about why it was you were relinquished, and start to help heal the process of healing, which can be painful. So this is a very powerful exhibition, and I would highly encourage anyone to come to see it. I believe this exhibition is touring Australia. It was in Canberra, it's now in Geelong, and it's bound to be somewhere else soon. I'll provide links in the videos that follow. Thanks very much, and I'll keep walking around and see what else jumps out. Julia Gillard, the Prime Minister of Australia of the day, about 5 or 6 years ago, gave a speech to a packed hall in Parliament. And that speech was to apologise on behalf of the nation for past adoption practices. It's an amazing speech because she really gives the language as to what happened. It's a beautifully written speech because it shows how families have been torn apart. It shows what happened to a generation of mothers who didn't have their children. And of course it shows what happened to a generation of children that didn't have their mother, creating a double life where children didn't know where they came from. So it's a powerful exhibition. But this one here is, this apology right behind me here, is one of those powerful moments. And Julia Gillard's speech was powerful. So I would highly encourage you Google Julia Gillard's apology to past adoption practices and the policies and practices, separation of mothers and babies. I'm just hearing it over my shoulder here because this is on a loop here. So it's a place where you can come and learn about the history, come and maybe get perspective on, for all adoptees in particular, on birth mothers and what they may have been forced into. So why would you come? To heal, to learn, to grow. What's it all about? It's about expanding your knowledge. It's about expanding your vocabulary so that you have the language to understand and create a different story. And how do we do that? Well, reading, visiting things like this, and understanding your story is, I think, the pathway to healing. And what if you did? Well, what if you did become a strong and centered person? This sort of a gallery is such a great place to start. It's emotional. There will be some of these plaques that will hit your story right between the eyes. But it is so valuable, and it's such a good step from the Australian government to have put this together. I was made aware of this by the organisation here in Victoria called Vanish, who have been so helpful in helping lots of adoptees heal and understand their own stories in a variety of ways. My name is Matthew Tate. This is Fork in the Road. We'll continue looking through this exhibition.
That denied you, the mothers, your fundamental rights and responsibilities to love and care for your children. You were not legally or socially acknowledged as their mothers, and you were yourselves deprived of care and support. To you, the mothers who were betrayed by a system that gave you no choice and subjected you to manipulation, mistreatment and malpractice, we apologise. We say sorry to you, the mothers who were denied knowledge of your rights, which meant you could not provide informed consent. You were given false assurances. You were forced to endure the coercion and brutality of practices that were unethical, dishonest, and in many cases illegal. And the apology continues. We know you have suffered enduring effects from these practices forced on you by others, for the loss, the grief, the disempowerment, the stigmatisation and the guilt. We say sorry. To each of you who were adopted or removed, who were led to believe your mother had rejected you, and who were denied the opportunity to grow up with your family and community of origin and to connect with your culture, we say sorry. We apologise to the sons and daughters who grew up not knowing how much you were wanted and loved. We acknowledge that many of you still experience a constant struggle with identity, uncertainty and loss, and feel a persistent tension between loyalty to one family and yearning for another. To you, the fathers who were excluded from the lives of your children and deprived of the dignity of recognition on your children's birth records, we say sorry. We acknowledge your loss and grief. We recognise that the consequences of forced adoption practices continue to resonate through many, many lives. To you, the siblings, grandparents, partners, and other family members who have shared in the pain and suffering of your loved ones, who were unable to share their lives, we say sorry. Many are still grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
hidden away. It's a powerful statement because that's what happened to a lot of mothers. They were sent away to have their baby back in 1950s, 1960s and even 1970s. Hidden away so the society, their aunts, their uncles, the butcher up the road, nobody would know about the shame of the family. The fact that the young girl was not married. This was the society, a very patriarchal slash, what was the other word, conservative society, where the church had great influence on people. So this one can hit quite a lot of us right between the eyes, because this is part of our mother's story, and it's probably good for an adoptee to understand that, because it starts to paint a picture, it starts to reframe what's going on with your adoption story, and to know that there were bigger forces at play than whatever your mother wanted. And this is good in that it takes a little bit of that not wanted stigma out of the subconscious mind of the adoptee. If they can understand and rewire that your mother was forced into this as a young, naive girl. So it's powerful, hidden away, and bundled off to some other city so that they would have the baby with someone else. Perhaps they'd go to a convent with some nuns. On here there's a powerful statement which you have a look at, and I think it says here, the nuns told me that having my baby taken away was a punishment for my sins. Now, that statement's not as powerful today as it was back then, because the church ran society. So it's powerful, hidden away, and this is what happened whilst all adoptees were in the bellies of their mothers. And some of that does get transferred, I'm sure. And that's where some healing is to be done, to help remove some of that shame or guilt that might be nested on a cellular level deep inside every adoptee. Via whatever method you like, I don't mind how you get there, but that is the journey. And that's what an exhibition like this is so good about producing, is ideas on where to heal. Words that help you focus your healing journey. Instead of just reading aimlessly, you actually get some focus on healing self. So my name's Matthew Tate, and we'll continue through the exhibition. In this part of the exhibition, you can see the name here is A Clean Break. And that was the theory put forward in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and up to 1980, that if you separated the baby from the mother, there would be no bonding. Now, I've done quite a bit of research in this area recently, been listening to guys like Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, and I've lots of other different references. And it seems pretty clear that we shouldn't separate a baby from its mother. And the philosophy back then was that there would not be that bonding, and that like a baby duckling, it will pattern itself, attach itself onto the first thing it sees out of the womb. But of course, that's not how humans work, because we've been bonding with our mother for 9 months in the womb. And so that theory is now being disproven with neuroscience and a bunch of other methods of testing, which you can go on that journey and research for yourself, and there's lots of evidence there. For my story, on my paperwork when I received it, on my my hospital papers, I think it was, my hospital papers had on it time of confinement. Ooh, it's a nasty one, isn't it? confinement, the moment I'm confined away from mother. Now, this can be a very bad thing for the psychology of any human being because our attachment begins at that time of life. And there's all sorts of attachment theories as to how we develop. And if you don't have that attachment, one of my questions is what happened to me between the date of confinement, which I think was like day 2, and about the 20th when I arrived at was the 20th? I think it was like a month later, I arrived at my adoptive family's house. Now, I had a great adoptive family. I loved life there. But the question is, what happened? How much loving did I get in those 20-odd days? 30-odd days of confinement. So a clean break, that was the theory back then. We know that you shouldn't even separate a puppy from its mother in dog terms for about 6 to 8 weeks, or the dog has all sorts of problems, yet they thought that we could separate a baby from its mother. So for all adoptees, this is a really valuable exhibition. Definitely come and see it. It's going to unpack a few things and it can be quite emotional, but it's so worth it for reframing your story. My name is Matthew Tate, and on I continue into the exhibition. And here I am still at the exhibition of adoption practices in Australia in the past, entitled Without Consent, and I'm at the area of contact. So contact, when you are trying to contact your natural family and you're coming from your adoptive family, there's a lot of bumps in the road. First of all, you've got the guilt of perhaps doing the wrong thing by your adoptive family, depending on the attitudes of your adoptive family, and that can be really hard. The guilt of chasing down your birthright is there depending on the attitudes of your adoptive family. Then, of course, we go into the birth family. Well, if you don't know the reason why you were given up in the first place, if you've not made any contact and then you're trying to, you don't know what you're going to find. So that contact, as they say here, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult at times. But yet, as an adoptee, we get drawn towards it. And I think this is biological. I don't think we can help it. But when we go in there, I want to make sure adoptees are strong. And that's why I'm creating content like this. I want to make sure you've unpacked your own story enough, you understand what's going on in the back of that mind, in your subconscious mind. Because once you get an understanding of that, you can understand, okay, I need to do some work before I go meeting these people. Now, it could be a wonderful story, or it could be a train wreck. I don't know what your story will be. But contact, this subject here appears on all of the adoption Facebook groups, forums, the ones I go looking at, it's always popping up. And there are some train wrecks on there. Oh my goodness, all sorts of bad things happen to some people. So before you go in, get to know yourself. Get to know what stories you've put up here. Because those stories, those beliefs, those patterns, those values, those memories are going to dictate the experience you have if it's not good. So work on yourself, find your center, find your inner peace, so that when you approach family, you're not looking for them to fill the hole in yourself. That would be my main message in this little one here, contact. When you're contacting them, yes, you're looking to fill some of your story, but I don't want them to be filling a hole in your heart or feeling missed love that maybe you didn't get growing up. Very important to start the journey of loving yourself before chasing down birth family. So I'm working on this for myself right now. I haven't met any of my birth family. And so I know a lot about them, but I haven't met, when I say birth family, I've met my half-brother, should I say, but I have not met any of my birth mother or my birth father. So that's all part of the journey for me too. So my situation's just as live as anybody else's. But that's why I'm doing this work, is for myself, but also to help all other adoptees as I find things that are valuable. So why come here? Well, for me, it's about understanding my own story. What's it all about? It's about expanding your vocabulary. How do we do it? By reading, by connecting things from our own story with those words so we understand the feelings that are inside ourselves, the subconscious patterns that are coming out of us, and how we can find our authentic self. And what if we did, when we approach and make contact, we could be empowered, we could be ready for anything, we can handle it, however good or bad it's going to be. And we can close that chapter if that's what it's about, or we can continue that relationship if that's where it ends up, whatever it's going to be with your natural family when you meet them, which I have not. So that's the benefit. You're finding your authentic self in the journey. My name is Matthew Tate, this is Fork in the Road, and I'll continue into the exhibition. I now find myself at this little plaque, and I just stumbled across this. I didn't see his smile again for 45 years. Now, it hasn't escaped me the fact that I'm 45 years old and never met my birth mother. So, between the eyes, talk about smacking it between the eyes. But it was clearly recognisable in the man he had become. When he gave me a big hug and acknowledged me as his first mother, he promised he would not disappear from my life again, but the impact of adoption, separation, and loss is lifelong. So that's why you should come to this kind of an exhibition, to unpack the story, to maybe inspire you to make the next move if you've been procrastinating like I did for 10 years with trying to make any moves with DNA or paperwork. It's a worthwhile journey. Reconciling the past. Finding a future. So in this plaque, it's hard, it says, for both parties to completely understand the pain and trauma suffered in those years of separation. So in here they talk about the fact that the mother gives up a baby 10, 30, 40 years later, 50 years later, then meets an adult. It's very difficult for the mother to reconcile that the baby is now a man. And there's still some of that biological need to look after the baby in that form, but that's not going to happen because it's now a little man or a little woman, or a grown-up adult woman, a grown-up adult man. And so also it's difficult for the adoptee to then recognise. It's challenging and fraught because it says here often they have certain expectations about the parents. So that's the tricky one. If you're going in with any expectation, with your birth mother in particular, because that's the more powerful relationship, but also your birth father. If there's any expectation, you've got to be very careful with that because it may be unrealistic and that person may not be able to fill that role. So expectation in that context, if you're looking for them to be your mother, that's not there anymore. So it's an unusual situation both people find themselves in. And this is why I'm advocating for people to go on their own healing journey. Mine is doing these videos, mine is reading these books, mine is studying things like NLP, EFT, SDH. If you don't know what those are, they're all methods. Inner child work. There's a range of ways that we can work on our psychology and our brains and how it can unpack and start to heal if you can create different meanings in your mind. But don't expect it to be all beer and skittles, all fun and laughter. There's some tricky times ahead in that relationship because you're strangers, but you're not, as one lady said to me in an adoption seminar I went to. So, yeah, the reconciliation or reconciling the past and finding a future, that's what we're doing. We're just trying to sort out the past so we can project off into the future. I don't want to spend forever looking backwards, but if you're struggling in life, we need to heal some of that pain. I think it was Louise Hay who said, "Honey, if you want to clean the house, you've got to see the dirt." Ouch. But I know there are many ways that you can see the dirt in a way that's not traumatic, that you can face. So, yeah, we're looking for a future. That's what this is about. It's about clearing out stuff for a better future. Finding a voice. So finding a voice is something that's been happening with increasing pace here in Australia over the last 10, 15, 20 years. There are groups for supporting birth mothers, there are groups for supporting adoptees, there are groups to try and help people understand their story. And so I've not actually been to these groups yet, so that's my next challenge. I'm reading the books, I'm doing some work, I'm doing some healing, but I need to go to one of these meetings. And so I'm going to put this video out there to make myself go. Go to the meeting, Matt. There's lots of them. There's one over here I can see where Jigsaw was in Queensland. Jigsaw supporting people separated by adoption. I know also Vanish, who I heard about this whole exhibition through and I've done some training with. Vanish are the Victorian arm of that finding a voice, that group healing, that counselling service, that
from their babies, which created a lifelong legacy of pain and suffering. We acknowledge the profound effects of these policies and practices on fathers, and we recognise the hurt these actions cause to brothers and sisters, grandparents, partners and extended family members. We deplore the shameful practices that denied you, the mothers, your fundamental rights and responsibilities to love and care for your children. You were not legally or socially acknowledged as their mothers, and you were yourselves deprived of care and support. To you, the mothers who were betrayed by a system that gave you no choice and subjected you to manipulation, mistreatment and malpractice, we apologise. We say sorry to you, the mothers who were denied knowledge of your rights, which meant you could not provide informed consent. You were given false assurances. You were forced to endure the coercion and brutality of practices that were unethical, dishonest and in many cases illegal. And the apology continues. We know you have suffered enduring effects from these practices forced on you by others, for the loss, the grief, the disempowerment, the stigmatisation and the guilt. We say sorry. To each of you who were adopted or removed, who were led to believe your mother had rejected you, and who were denied the opportunity to grow up with your family and community of origin and to connect with your culture, we say sorry. We apologise to the sons and daughters who grew up not knowing how much you were wanted and loved. We acknowledge that many of you still experience a constant struggle with identity, uncertainty and loss, and feel a persistent tension between loyalty to one family and yearning for another. To you, the fathers who were excluded from the lives of your children and deprived of the dignity of recognition on your children's birth records, we say sorry. We acknowledge your loss and grief. We recognise that the consequences of forced adoption practices continue to resonate through many, many lives. To you, the siblings, grandparents, partners, and other family members who have shared in the pain and suffering of your loved ones, who were unable to share their lives, we say sorry. Many are still grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
So, a powerful speech by the then Prime Minister Julia Gillard. Brings a tear to the eye. Emotions come up for every adoptee listening to that. It's powerful. So, this has been the Without Consent exhibition at the National Wool Museum in the middle of Geelong, just up from the waterfront. I highly recommend people come and have a look at this. It's in Geelong until I think the 20th of, January. It's currently December the 4th, 2019. So it's here for another month and nearly 2 months. And then I believe it goes elsewhere. So I guess make contact with the National Archives as to where it goes next. This has been a valuable and moving afternoon. This is the second time I've been here. The first time I just walked around and I thought I needed to come back and I needed to take some video footage and give some insights and some thoughts and some feelings as to what's around this, because that's, I think, what my journey is about unpacking those thoughts and feelings until I'm healed. That's the goal. And also to share with you all what can help you. And out of this, I hope you get one little snippet, one thing, just one, where it maybe gives you a new idea, a new word, something to focus on, somewhere to go, someone to talk to, where something maybe has rung true in all of the things I've said, so that you can go on your own adoption journey and do so in healing your own story, creating a new one, and having a bright future. I think that's the goal for every adoptee, is a bright future where we're no longer looking backwards, we're looking forwards. My name's Matthew Tate. This is Fork in the Road YouTube channel. This was, or is, Without Consent at the National Wool Museum in Geelong, Victoria, Australia. Thanks very much, and I will see you next time.